Honey Don't is a neo-noir comedy where we follow Honey O'Donoghue, played by Margaret Qualley. She's a private investigator looking into the death of a young lady who had previously contacted her about her services. This leads her to investigate the strange activity of a church led by the mischievous Reverend Drew Devlin, played by Chris Evans, so that she can figure out the connection between them. So this movie is a detective comedy. We follow Honey as she strolls around the small town of Bakersfield, sticking out like a sore thumb throughout everything. As for the core subject, there's a bit of a recurring theme of subverting hopelessness and not being defined by the past. At least that's what the opening credits and the song that plays over it, paired with the plot threads, seem to suggest. How this all relates to our protagonist is a little bit of a stretch. It seems to be implying that there's so much more for her out there, but it doesn't really line up with her character arc on the surface. But it's a fish out of water story. Honey is defined by unflinching gravitas and her intense focus. She has a shroud of mystique around her, carried by the fact that she comes off as all business. The dynamics that she has with other characters tend to be a bit awkward because many of the characters that she interacts with are either very dumb or much less charming, or both. There's a layer of humor in the fact that you know that she is much smarter than them, but she's very patient and tolerates everyone. She'll sometimes pause before responding to someone, and in that beat, you can kind of make out that she is trying to decide what to say that is professional and productive without being condescending, and her sympathetic demeanor is the cherry on top. This also gives Honey the esteem of a sleek detective, which is interesting because you come to find out that she's actually not all that great at solving mysteries. The big joke here is that it's a detective movie turned on its head. She's got the style and demeanor that you would expect from a serious detective, and there is a mystery at the center of everything. But a solid mystery is not what this movie seems to be interested in providing. Not only do we immediately know what happens, but Honey doesn't really solve things so much as the pieces just kind of fall into place right in front of her, and not really in a tasteful or clever way. The movie was actually pretty anticlimactic. Honey doesn't really influence the plot so much as the plot just happens to her. While this contributes to the subversive nature of everything, it just makes for a pretty uninteresting story. So the movie seems a lot less interested in providing us an interesting mystery as it is just providing us a strange blend of characters and of course the occasional quippy banter. It seems to think that the banter is much wittier than it actually is. While it does have the rhythm of witty banter courtesy of the competent actors, not much of it was actually really funny. For example,
Tuesdays I dry out.
Today's Wednesday.
Today is Tuesday.
Spooky.
I hate to be that guy in a YouTube video who raises his nose to comedy, because honestly, dunking on comedy is really easy and cheap. But I gotta ask, did anyone actually find that bit funny? Like, I get the joke, it's making him seem dim-witted while he's trying to pursue Honey, but is getting the day of the week wrong actually funny? Like, oh, I thought it was Wednesday, but you know, it's actually Tuesday. I'm sorry, but I would not call that comedy. I would just call that a conversation. That's not to say that there weren't some funny moments. There were a few jokes that were actually pretty humorous. Otherwise, the movie is just running off a lot of monotonous attempts at humor, coupled with a mystery that isn't exciting to watch and a fair amount of monotonous subject matter. But then there's all the sex that the movie also seems to think is really funny. While it does add a splash of color to this generally mundane picture, a lot of the time it just wasn't that clever. Compare this to Ethan Coen's last movie, Drive Away Dolls, which, like this movie, he co-wrote with his wife Trisha Cook and casted Margaret Qualley as the lead. I actually liked this movie. Seemingly, I was the only person who liked that movie. I just really got the humor. It made a lot more sense because it was deliberately really immature, but in a self-aware and tongue-in-cheek way. So all the sexual situations and the big reveal on that movie, they worked because they were deliberately stupid. In this movie, it's just literally hinging on viewers going, ah ha ha, she's washing her sex toys. That's an inappropriate thing that we shouldn't see. Hilarious. I will say that the steamy action in this movie gives it a layer of excitement. That is something I expect the older viewers to understand better than the younger ones. You get that feeling of, yeah, get it girl, like you would if it were a friend of yours getting lucky, and not so much because you want to get aroused watching a movie. I don't think anyone is really looking for the latter. So really the best thing about this movie is Margaret Qualley. The movie seems to rely on us recognizing her as an actress and knowing how much energy she can bring to the table, which isn't really a bad thing. Plenty of movies do that, but there's otherwise not much to say about her character. Honey is sleek, but Margaret isn't doing anything revolutionary. She's shooting straight with her performance. Had the script been better, Honey could have been a slam dunk of a character because Margaret is just really good at making characters feel authentic. Chris Evans was all right, though I can promise you that if you see this, you will walk out wishing he were better weaved into the story. He commits to the bit, and it's fun seeing him do this type of role, but it's hard to say that he was a good casting choice. His natural charm just didn't seem like it lined up with how we were supposed to feel about this character. And then there's Aubrey Plaza. Much like Honey, her character is pretty composed, so there's not much to say performance-wise. Her involvement in the story will likely perplex most of you at some point. To add to that, some of the fragments of the story involving Honey's family will also probably have that effect on you, as it splits off into a hodgepodge of personal affairs. Some of those pieces seem to have their ties to the main plot line, but their relevance is just so loose and underutilized, so in the end, everything just feels really disjointed and messy. While some of the loose ends are left untied for you to fill in the gap, especially in the last moment, some of them feel like a mistake, or as if the script just wasn't finished. So Ethan Coen and the Dolls Band have all come back with this movie, and they've unfortunately dialed back the cheese and raunchiness, but without dialing anything else up, like suspense or grit. In its attempt at being a meta neo-noir that doesn't play by the rules, it succeeds, and the result is a rather boring movie. So overall, I'd call this a pretty lacking movie. It just feels half-baked. I would not recommend this movie. The only reason you might enjoy it is if you like the actors involved, but don't expect an interesting plot or a comedy that will leave you buzzing. Thanks for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you next week with my review of Caught Stealing.